Professor Nam-Yong Lee's commentary, long, from a global standard perspective, the June 3rd nationwide local elections must ensure that the democratic principle of checks and balances operates to guarantee the maximum benefit for the people in liberal democratic states. The most important political principle is to prevent the concentration of power and to protect the freedom and rights of the people. Since the political philosopher Montesquieu, modern democratic nations have widely adopted a common principle. That principle is the mechanism of checks and balances, namely the principle of the separation and distribution of power. This principle must operate not only among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, but also between the central government and local governments. When power becomes concentrated in a single authority, liberal democracy may remain only in form while substantive freedom weakens. In the current political environment of the Republic of Korea, the most important question is this: should the governance of the current administration, led by Lee Jae-myung, extend to a structure in which the same political force dominates local power as well, or should a system of checks and balances be established between the central government and local governments? This is not simply a matter of party competition, rather it is a local election that will determine the institutional health of democracy. Global research on democracy clearly demonstrates the dangers of concentrated power. Studies by international democracy institutes explain that the core institutional structure of democracy consists of four key elements: separation of powers, checks and balances, the rule of law, and freedom of the press. These institutional arrangements function to prevent the abuse of power and to enhance the transparency of policy decision-making. International statistics provide meaningful insight. According to the Democracy Index published by the Economist Intelligence Unit, out of 167 countries worldwide, only 25 countries are classified as full democracies, and only about 6.6% of the world's population lives under a full democratic system. This statistic delivers an important message. Democracy is not a system that maintains itself automatically. It is sustained only through continuous checks and balances. As power becomes more concentrated, democracy tends to weaken. In fact, recent global studies indicate that trends of power concentration and democratic backsliding have been increasing worldwide. Furthermore, research in public administration by the OECD indicates that systems of checks and balances are essential institutional mechanisms that limit the concentration of power and ensure accountability and transparency in policymaking. Political economy research reaches similar conclusions. Numerous studies show that countries with strong institutional mechanisms to check government power tend to exhibit higher policy credibility, stronger protection of property rights, more stable contractual environments, and more favorable conditions for economic growth. In other words, checks and balances are not merely political principles, they are institutional mechanisms directly connected to the economic welfare of citizens. When we examine countries with the highest levels of democratic performance globally, a clear pattern emerges. Nordic countries such as Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark consistently rank at the top of democracy indices. These countries possess strong structures of distributed power and robust local autonomy. In these nations, strong systems of mutual oversight operate among the central government, local governments, legislatures, and executive authorities. These institutional structures form the foundation for high national income, high levels of public trust in government, and high quality of life. The Republic of Korea has adopted a similar constitutional framework. The Constitution of Korea guarantees local autonomy, and local governments are independent political authorities formed through the direct elections of residents. Local governments are not subordinate administrative units of the central government. They are democratic institutions that represent the interests of local citizens. What then is the meaning of local elections? Local elections are not merely about choosing regional politicians. They are a fundamental democratic mechanism for adjusting the balance of power between the central government and local governments. If the central government and local governments are all controlled by the same political force, policy implementation may proceed more quickly. However, the function of oversight and accountability may weaken at the same time. Conversely, when the central government and local governments are controlled by different political forces, policy debates and adjustments may occur, but the democratic function of checks and balances becomes stronger. For this reason, advanced democratic nations place great importance on the distribution and balance of political power. The concentration of power inevitably increases the risk of policy errors. The same concern is being raised in the current political situation in Korea. If the central government, already holding strong authority, is joined by local governments controlled by the same political force, the ability to check policy failures may weaken. Therefore, from the perspective of global democratic standards, the political structure that best serves the interests of the people is one characterized by a balance of power. When the central government and local governments operate within a relationship of mutual checks and balances, policies are determined more carefully and administrative transparency increases. From this perspective, local elections are not merely political contests, they are critical choices that determine the structure of democracy itself. Through this election, citizens will decide whether to adopt a structure of concentrated power or a structure of balanced power. Democracy is not completed through the victory of a single political party. Democracy is sustained through the balance of power. Therefore, in order to maximize the interests of the people, it is necessary to design a political structure in which the central government and local governments operate according to the principles of checks and balances. This is precisely how democracy functions according to global standards, and it is the institutional principle commonly adopted by advanced democratic nations. Thank you for watching Professor Nam-Yong Lee's commentary, Long.